Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adventures with Andy. It's time for the May 2021 dye along with ChemKnits, and the inspiration photo this time is this picture of a gorgeous blue jay. We are not going to be dyeing that yarn today. I know you're probably thinking, then why are you bothering to tell us about the dye along if you're not actually dyeing it today? Well, no, wait till that video. It's because today we're gonna try to dye gray yarn. Now, I thought that as soon as I took a look at this picture, I was like, okay, this would be really cool to do as a mini skein gradient with grays and blues. But of course I'm using food coloring, and I already knew that dyeing yarn black with food coloring is really hard to do. When I did it before, it took me like 3 days and lots of dye bath sessions and color correcting sessions, and yeah, it was tough. So I decided that I would start off first by going out and doing some research and find out the best way to dye yarn gray with food coloring. And I went to some forums, and then I read some articles, and I even posted over on the ChemKnits Lab Facebook group and said, does anybody have any tips for how to dye yarn gray with food coloring? And the response I got back from Rebecca at ChemKnits is, oh my goodness, that's super hard. I think I've only done that once and only by accident. So apparently I like to set myself a challenge, don't I? So I did get some tips from people of different ways that they have had some success with dyeing yarn gray with food coloring, either on purpose or by accident. And we're gonna try a few of those today to see which one comes up with the color that we like best before we launch into dyeing the whole gradient for the dye along. That will be a separate video because otherwise this would take hours of your time. So we're doing it in 2 separate videos. I've got 6 little mini skeins here and 1 little micro skein. This is Dyer Supplier 7525 Superwash Merino nylon fingering weight yarn. I wound these mini skeins myself because I didn't have enough mini skeins of any yarn on hand to do both the gradient for the dye along and these tests. And I wanted to make sure that I used the same kind of yarn for both, because different yarns will take up dye differently. So it really wouldn't be a good test to try this out in mini skeins of one type of yarn and then do the dye along dyeing in a different mini skein, you know, with a different type of yarn, because it might not work the same. So I wound these myself from a 100 gram skein of the Dyer Supplier 7525 fingering. And that is, as I said, it's 100 grams, it's 415 yards. That's for the full skein. I cannot tell you exactly how many yards or how many grams these mini skeins are. Basically what we did is we wound this yarn 41 times around my niddy noddy for each of these little mini skeins. There was math involved, there were mistakes made. It worked out. We had 10 little wraps around my niddy noddy left. By the way, my niddy noddy, we now know apparently is not a yard. I did try weighing these on my scale. My scale apparently is losing its grasp on reality because it was convinced that this weighs nothing. And I know by the laws of physics that that's not possible. It has to weigh something. Weighing it along with another one and doing some math, we figured out this one is 6 grams, and each of these is on average about 15 grams, more or less. Some a little more, some a little less. We have 4 different types of dyeing that we're going to try. One person, their suggestion to me was that gray is 1 part red, 1 part blue, 1 part yellow. So we're going to mix up a gray from this McCormick's food coloring, just the red, blue, and yellow. Somebody suggested, could you just use a more dilute dye stock, which is what I was thinking, just a more more dilute dye bath. So we're going to do that with this Wilton's black. I do know it breaks from experience, but I do know I can get a true black from it if I work hard enough. So maybe I can get a good gray from it as well. Another person said that they had gotten a good gray one time by mixing a very light lavender with Wilton's pink and blue, and then layering over it with yellow. So that's what we're going to try. And I already knew that I wanted to go low and slow with this. Low heat, a lot of time, give it time to fully saturate into the yarn and pick up all of the colors before trying to set it. So not going to be using any vinegar to start out with. I'm not going to be using any heat to start out with, because if I do, we're going to be seeing that red strike faster, and that's going to throw everything off, and we might not end up with gray. But one thing that people had suggested, which I've read about before and just completely forgot, is salt. Salt actually slows the process of yarn taking up dye. And you can use this if you're trying to get a solid colorway, to just level it and make it take things up slower so that you don't end up with darker and lighter patches. You get much more even color. So we're also going to try using some salt to see if that will impact how well it goes. After we dye these and see which one comes up with the gray that we like best, then we'll try different dilutions of that to see how that turns out, until we can dial into the gray that we think is going to work best in our full gradient when we do it for the dye along.
Dun 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 dun. I'll be back.
All right, now I know that these mason jars hold 2 cups of water, but I want to be more precise than normal. So I'm actually going to use a measuring cup. It's 2 cups. And I'm going to start by mixing up the Wilton's Violet, simply because this is hot water from the tap, just plain water, hot from the tap, and these liquid gels dissolve better when you use warm water. It is like dried out paste. It's like solid, y'all. Oh my goodness. So very, very solid. Yeah, this is about a 1/4 teaspoon. If I had it, I would use 1/8 of a teaspoon instead, since we're wanting really dilute colors. Oh dear. Gotta get it off of here somehow. Yeah. This time I'm only going to fill it halfway full to mix it up, so I'm not risking getting it all the way to the top. Then I'll add the other cup. Okay, this one I'm going to mix up just the light purple out of these 2 colors. Okay, that's about 1/8. And that's what it's going to have to be because my jar's empty. Huh, apparently I never opened this one, ever. God, look at that. Oh, that's just... It's so weird when they separate out like this when you haven't used them. It's also about 1/8 of a teaspoon. About the same amount as the blue. We hope. God, that was weird. Okay, I think that's mixed up pretty good. So now I'm going to put the other cup of water in here. So I that read purple to you?
Yeah, ish.
We got some breaking at the top. Blue's breaking. Now this is going to be the yellow to layer with that. And same as before, 1/8 of a teaspoon. That's going to have to be what it's going to be because I'm out of yellow. Okay. Okay, last but not least, we're going to mix up that McCormick's. One, two, three. I have a brownish gray. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And it's really light. I'm gonna put one more drop of each. I think 1 or 2.
Go for 1.
1, 2, 3. There's like no color though. What do you think?
It looks like it's wet.
It looks like it's wet. That's what I was thinking. You can put one more drop of each. That'll be 5 of each.
Okay.
2, 3. The nice thing about the liquids is that they do mix up really easy. Now that our dye stocks are mixed, I can go ahead and aliquot it out into the mason jars I'm going to use to dye our mini skeins with. Now obviously if I wanted a more solid color, a more even color, I would use a much larger container than just a mason jar so that the yarn would have plenty of room to move. Unfortunately, I don't have anything like that, especially not, 6 of those. I could do 1 at a time in my crock pot. That would take me a week at least to do. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna do it in just mason jars and hope for the best. We'll probably get some gradients, that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and mix this again real quick. This is the Wilton's Black. I'm just gonna give it another quick mix just in case there's still any solid dye in there. Yarn mop, please report to the garage for yarn mop duty. Yarn mop to the garage for yarn mop duty. You may recognize this as our yarn mop from our last episode. The other yarn mop, the little micro mini skein, it's completely saturated. So it's just sitting in the warm water in the crock pot right now. And I'm gonna start by putting in 5 milliliters of this dye stock in here. Just gonna squeeze out the excess. I'm just gonna put in 1/4 teaspoon of salt. The people who recommended using salt did not specify an amount. They just said sprinkle a pinch of salt. So 1/4 teaspoon should definitely be enough. Another cup of water in here, sir.
Cold?
Yes. This is a cup, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, that's number 2 though, I just take number 5.
Okay. And really I could just fill this up all the way to the top. Yeah, I just use my fingers. Just kind of want to Get that mixed up really good with the salt and the dye and everything. And we're gonna pop the lid on here. This is number 1. This is just our Wilton's black with salt and a very low dilution. That is 5 milliliters. Next up is the Wilton's blue and pink icing gel to make purple, which we will start with dyeing the mini skein with this, and then we will go back and add some yellow in to level it out and make it a gray. Okay, this one I will also do 5 milliliters, just to start. That is a very, very light color, very light. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Top that off. That is incredibly pale. Incredibly pale. I don't know that that's really going to have any color in it at all. All right, I'm making the executive decision. I'm going to add another 5. And of course, because this is superwash, it's already striking, as you can see. All right, go ahead and put that in there. All right, it's still not a whole lot of color. Hopefully we get a light purple. Next up is the McCormick's number 3. Wow, that is really, really pale. That is seriously, seriously pale, y'all. That's gonna need more than 5. 20?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. $25. $30. There was like no.
There's 45 in there now.
Sorry.
Because you had 25, you put 10 more in.
Ah, okay. So it's 35. 40. And 50. That is
Like smoke.
incredibly light. Incredibly light. Yeah. Go ahead and one-quarter teaspoon of salt. There's like no color in there, is there?
Not really, no.
Okay, I know we've already got 50 milliliters in here of this dye stock. We're gonna go ahead and add another 50. And 5. So that is 100 milliliters of that dye stock. Ah, get in there. Wasting all that dye. Ah. Okay, so now we just let these 3 jars of yarn sit and take up this dye and go from there. We still have 3 skeins over here that we can use for dyeing some more gray. So it's the next day, and we definitely don't have gray. Even more than that, let's take a look at these. We don't even really have a purple per se, maybe a little bit on this one, but as you can see, this was our Wilton's black, and the blue has not exhausted on it. This is our purple that we mixed up, and it's a very, very light purple, very pretty purple. And our blue is not exhausted from it. And over here is the gray that we mixed up from the red, yellow, and blue, and it's actually got green in the water. The yellow hasn't even exhausted. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add a tablespoon of vinegar to each of these jars and let them sit for a little bit longer and see if we can get them to exhaust. Now this one, we know we're not going to get gray yet because we have to add yellow to it. I'm not holding a lot of hope out for this one. I'm trying to reserve judgment, but I'm not really holding out a whole lot of hope for that red, yellow, and blue that we mixed together. It's coming out much more of a brown. So one there. One there, and one there. Stir this up a bit. Now, one thing I do want to mention is when I came out last night about 8:30, 9 o'clock to check on these, the water in the jars was hot. Not like scalding hot, but like hot water from the tap hot. Hot enough that for a second I thought, wait a minute. We used warm water to mix up the dye bath. Was it hot when we mixed this up so that, you know, instead of doing this with cold, like we intended to, we ended up doing it actually with hot because of the dye? And I thought, no, it can't be that because we used such a small amount of the dye, and the water that we used, just the tap water, for the rest of the dye bath was cold, just straight cold from the tap. So no, the water that we started with was cold, but it got so hot here in the garage during the course of the day, because we're heading into summer here in North Carolina, that it actually heated up the water in the mason jars. It heated up our dye bath. So we weren't able to do it cold, and I'm not expecting the weather to cooperate much better today. It's supposed to be another warm day today. All right, so I did go and set these jars out on the deck for a while in the afternoon because Chad said, oh, we can go ahead and put these jars of dye in the freezer so they don't get too hot in here overnight and grow any mold or anything. They won't freeze overnight. And he went to get them out and they were solid blocks of ice. So as long as they were going to sit out there, I figured, well, I might as well set these out there too. These have thawed now completely. But I'm a little confused by what we have here. Okay, this is, take this one first. And our dye baths did completely clear. This is the just straight plain Wilton's Violet at just a low dilution. And it's come out to sort of a really light purple. We've got a little blue in there going through, but I think this one is our closest bet at being gray once it's dry. This one thoroughly confused me. This was our purple that we mixed with the Wilton's pink and royal blue. And if you remember before, it was kind of the skein was pink and we still had blue in the dye bath. Well, the dye bath has exhausted and our skein is now 95% pale blue. We have a little bit of purple throughout here, but very, very little. And I'm really confused by that. And then last, we have this one. This is our skein that we mixed up. 1 part red, 1 part blue, 1 part yellow from the McCormick. And it is the least potentially gray of all of them. It is just sort of a reddish, greenish brown. So now we got decisions to make of what to do. I think on this one here, I'm going to add some yellow to it because it is reading very light purple, very lavender right now. And since what somebody had suggested was getting to a purple and then adding yellow to go to gray, we'll go ahead and give that a shot. I think this one, I might put in more of its dye bath, just so that there's more color in there. And this one is just, I don't know, y'all. It's just blue. And it is just breaking my brain because it doesn't make any sense. I might try putting some of the black in there. But the first thing that we need to do is we need to take some of the liquid out of these jars, and then we can put some more dye in there. I'm going to put in okay, I'm going to put in 30 milliliters of the yellow into that one. And then just top it off the rest of the way with the water I took out. Now this has still got vinegar in it, so it's not going to be a matter of a cold bath striking. Now for this one, this is more of its dye. And this one I am going to go ahead and put a half a cup of its dye in there because it was just so faint. And that's still just really, really light, isn't it? All right, I'm going to go ahead and put another half cup of this in here, which would be 1 cup plus however many milliliters we originally did. Fills it all the way to the top. Alright, put this in here, set this one to the side, and now we have this one, which I am confused by it. This is our homemade purple, right? Now looking at it here, it does look much more blue, because if you can tell from the lid, that's looking very navy blue. And maybe that's why we didn't get a purple. We had originally put an 1/8 teaspoon in, and that's about how much we're putting in again now. As best as we can judge. Let's see if we can get this to more of a purple. Let's put just a little bit of it, and Put it here on our yarn mop. Yeah, that's definitely looking much more purple. So note to self, apparently if you want purple, 2 pink to 1 blue. At least using the Wilton's Icing Gel pink and royal blue. And I went ahead and put 20 milliliters. And yet you can definitely tell looking at our dye bath now, it's definitely purple. Purple. Now I'm going to put the yarn back in here. And this is ice cold. It is refreshingly cold. It's definitely not hot water going in for these dye baths. But it is still very, very hot and humid here in the garage. Okay. Ah. Yes, I'm making a mess. Y'all should know me by now. I always make a mess. Wow, that's already grabbing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That vinegar doing its job, huh? We are going to just let these sit here and soak up that dye goodness while we go to the park. All right, so it is the next day. Again, our dye baths have exhausted once again, and we definitely have some conclusions to make. This is our yarn with the Wilton's black, and then added in that yellow in to color correct it because the Wilton's black was reading a bit more purple. And yeah, we have a really pretty nice gray here. We do have like this section here where it's really yellow, and I think that's where I injected the yellow dye in, and it struck there really fast. So yeah, lesson learned on that. We do have some splotchiness in other places where we've got more gray, more purple, and that's because, as I mentioned in the beginning, these are very small jars, even though they're mini skeins, and it doesn't have enough room for the yarn to move around. This is our second one, which is where we mixed up the purple from the Wilton's blue and the Wilton's pink. And even though it was looking mostly blue yesterday, added that extra pink in. You can see the dye bath is clear, and we have the fairly nice purple. We've got some places that are still more blue. Again, it's the same thing as with the Wilton's black, where it just doesn't have enough room to move around. But we've definitely got some nice purple. So I think at this point, this one is ready to have some yellow added in and see what kind of gray we end up with on that. And then there's this one, where we mixed equal parts red, blue, and yellow McCormick's liquid food coloring, and it's brown. It is a yellowish brown. It is not gray. It's a very nice tan, but it's brown. And you go back in there. If you look at the dye in the jar, even though we put equal amounts of color in there, it's kind of like a dark moss or algae green. And I could try color correcting at least the dye with some red to get it to gray, and you know, try putting that in here with it and see what we come up with. But honestly, I've done more work on this one already than I have on the other two, and having to color correct the dye and try to color correct this brown into a gray, that already is just way more work than either of these would be. So I am sorry, little jar number 3, but you are out of the race. You're a great brown, and yeah, I will definitely keep this in mind for the future when I need brown, because I'm always having trouble mixing up brown. Okay, so I'm going to start by taking this out and just squeeze out the excess. Chad, your memory is better than mine. Do you happen to remember how much of the yellow I put in with that one?
Was it 10, maybe?
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Yes. Oh dear. Y'all, Chad's memory is getting to be as bad as mine. This is a problem. Those of us who know us know that I rely on Chad's memory because my own, not good. And just put it in here. Now that we've got some good test cases, we're going to scale this up a bit. And we're going to use some larger containers so that the yarn does have more room to move around and see if we can get a more consistent tone. I've got two here. I've got just my plastic tub. I've got my crock pot. The crock pot is not plugged in. There is, ooh, oh, that's nice, icy cold water in both of them. Yes, it is hot out today, so this feels really good. We're starting with the Wilton's Black, and we put, if we remember correctly, 5 milliliters into the jar for our test run. I'm going to double that to 10 because I want to see if I can pump it up to a darker gray. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that here in the crock pot. In the background you hear Muffin. What's up, sweetheart? Muffin, say hello to your internet fans. I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 people who know you who are watching. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, and then in this container, I'm going to put 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 100 milliliters of that dye. And I'm going to put our salt in. And last time I only put in a 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to see if I have enough to put a 1/2 teaspoon in. 2. Yeah. It's about a 1/2 teaspoon in each. Just to make sure that salt is evenly dispersed. And I'm just going to put 1 in each. Swish it around a bit, make sure that the yarn can all access. Just spreading the yarn out really good. And you can see it's got a whole lot more room to move. So the yarn can all just sort of float around so that the strands on the inside are going to be able to get access to the dye. And we're not going to have some places that are all squished up together and giving this essentially resist. Put the lid on the crock pot and we'll run upstairs and get the lid for this. And we're not going to put any heat on these today. They're just going to sit here and cold vat dye for a while, at least until tomorrow. Okay, so it is the next day. Actually just finished having lunch. And take a look at this. We still got some blue in here. We've got a darker blue in here. And if we take a look at our skeins, this one is a nice bright hot pink. This one is a dusty pink. And they are of course both pink because the blue has not started to strike yet. Because we got no heat, we got no acid. And we're going to take care of that right now. I'm going to go ahead and add some vinegar in. This is 1 teaspoon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that is 2 tablespoons in that one because it's a lot of water. I'm trying to raise the pH of the water. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which is 1 1/3 tablespoons. Not quite as much vinegar in that one because it's not as much water. Just go ahead and stir this around some. Make sure that that vinegar is fully dispersed. And I'm not worried about this yarn getting tangled as I do this because I've got plenty of ties on it. And now we're going to add some heat. Now obviously the crock pot, I could just plug that in, but there is no way to plug in this tub. Luckily, it's going to be in the 90s today. And since it's about 1:30, it's already very warm outside. So we're going to take these out and set them on the deck. So now I'm just going to let this sit out here while I go back up to my office and get some work done. Okay, so this has been sitting outside on the deck for about 4.5 hours now. I am confused by some things. Okay, first the thing I am not confused by, that is this one, which is the Wilton's black. We still have the tiniest little hint of blue left in our dye bath. And our yarn is purple, which is about what we expected from our tests. It's sort of a grayish purple, so now we can just add some yellow in there to color correct that to a gray.
Do you want that picked up?
What?
The yarn?
That's a great idea. That is an excellent idea. I didn't even think about that. Thank you, Chad.
You're welcome.
Seriously, y'all, I would just be lost without him. Okay, there you go. Take that. I'm going to put in 20, 10, 20, 30. Let's see how that looks. Hey, we got a nice light green. Okay, we're going to start with that, with 30, just to see how that does. May need to add some more in, and that's fine. I'm also going to add in another tablespoon of vinegar. Sorry, teaspoon. Another teaspoon of vinegar. Not tablespoon, teaspoon. All right, I'll go ahead and put another one in there, so that'll take me to 6. For an even 2, correct?
Yep.
Hey, took me out doing math. Woohoo! All right, I shall take the yarn back. Thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
And put it all back in here. I will plug that in and turn it on as soon as we're done here. Okay, this is the one that confuses me. I showed you this before, and the skein of yarn was a nice, solid, beautiful, hot pink, right? And we didn't add anything to it other than a little bit of vinegar and put it outside in the sun. So someone explain to me why I now have this really pretty purple, pink, blue yarn. I can understand the purple and the pink. It's the blue I don't understand because this was all pink before. And I am so confused. I can't think of what did this. Yes, it was out in the sun, and sun can fade colors, and red is a color that can fade in the sun, but not when the yarn's wet. It should not do that. So I don't think that's what it was, and I don't think it would fade just in stripes like that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm very, very confused. Obviously our dye bath has not exhausted, as you can tell just looking at it. So I'm going to add some more vinegar in there. And I am going to go ahead and add yellow in there. I don't know that we're going to get a gray, because this is the mason jar of the Wilton's pink and blue that we added the yellow to. Now admittedly I came back and I added some more yellow dye to this off camera last night, but when we took it out there, this was a nice pretty gray, and now it's green and pink, and I am just so confused. But I'm gonna go ahead and fish this out, add in some yellow, add in some more vinegar. I mean, it's an absolutely gorgeous skein of yarn, but you know, y'all know I love broken violet, and that basically looks like broken violet. And I'm gonna add the same 30. So 1, 2, I think one more, because it's still a very blue color.
It's kind of a seafoam green there.
It is. We all know how I feel about seafoam green, right?
How do you feel about seafoam green?
I love the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I love seafoam. I do not like seafoam green. I think that's a better, you think?
Yeah.
And let me put 1, 2, 3. All right. That takes us up to 3 tablespoons. Switch this around. Would you care to do the honors? Just kind of spread it out and just lay it in there. Sort of swish it around a bit so that the skein has plenty of access to the dye. There you go. Pop this lid back on. Okay, so obviously I don't have a way to heat up this, so it's just going to continue cold vat dyeing. Gonna go ahead and plug in the crock pot and turn it on high and let it come up to temp. The dye bath in our crock pot has exhausted. The water is hot. Not boiling, not simmering, but it's definitely hot. And our yarn looks pretty good, but it's still a little more on the purple side than what I want. There are some parts of it that are just a beautiful, perfect gray, and then some that are still purple, a few that are kind of pink, and there's not anything I can do about that at this point. But, oh, you get back in there. How dare you? How very dare you? Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more yellow in this to see if I can't shift that last of the purple on over to gray. And hopefully I don't take this too far and ruin all my hard work. I don't have Chad out here to remind me to do things like take the yarn out. I almost made a catastrophic error, y'all. It's 1. This is hard to do with only one hand. And 2 for another 20 milliliters. And you can see it's just a very light yellow. I'm worried about some spots up here where the yarn's got kind of wrapped around itself, but there's not a whole lot I can do about that at this point. All right, you can go ahead and put the lid back on. Put the lid back on the yellow dye. And since this is already hot, I'm going to go ahead and unplug it and then just let this cool. And here's our finished yarn. Let's start with least successful and work our way up to more successful, the most successful that we had. This is the Wiltons where we mixed together the blue with the pink to get a light lavender and then layered over with yellow. And as you can see, what we actually ended up with is a very, very pale, some might even call it seafoam green with sort of a brownish pinky purple in places and some more pink in places. And yeah, all in all, that's not gray. We might have a few tiny little segments that if you really stretch the definition, you could kind of say we're a light gray. I am not sure what happened with this one. I'm gonna have to investigate that some more. We also went back and did the scale up on it, you know, in a tub, in a, you know, where we have more water. This is what we ended up with. This is mostly green. We've got some blue, very, very little bit of purple and pink in here. If this had a little bit more purple in here, I would say this was a great mermaid shade. But yeah, I have no idea what's up with this. I don't know if it's the pink and the red dye that's in that pink compared to what's in Wilton's violet, but I will be investigating that some more at a later date. Obviously, this is not going to be a solution for us for the dye along. Next up is the McCormick's, where we mixed equal parts red, blue, and yellow, which theoretically should have given us gray. And what we actually ended up getting is sort of a yellowish brown. It never even approached gray at any point. It's a really nice, like, harvesty color. And the next time that I want to use a tan or a light brown, I will definitely go back and try that again. But yeah, this didn't even come close to gray. I'm sorry I held out high hopes for you. It just didn't work out. And then here we have the Wilton's black. We've got some sections here where it's very yellow, sort of light yellow green here. And that I think is where I squirted the yellow dye in instead of putting the yellow dye in the water first, then mixing up and then adding the yarn. But on the sections where it doesn't have that excessive amount of yellow, like right here, we got a really, really nice pale gray. It does have a little bit of purple in places, you know, it leans slightly lavender, and in other places it leans slightly gray, or slightly green. But overall, it's a really nice gray. Okay, so of course, that's the other one that we went ahead and scaled up to see if we could get a darker color with it. And we did this one in the crock pot. And look at how awesome that turned out. Again, we have some places where it reads a little bit more yellowish green. And a few spots where it reads a little bit lavender purple, like, yeah. Right here we get a little bit of pink coming through. Dyeing in a crock pot, even a little skein like this, it's just really hard to get a solid. And of course, when you're dealing with a color that breaks, that's going to happen. So, but overall, this is a really, really nice shade of gray. If you compare it to our proof of concept test, you can see, yeah, it's definitely darker. And these are both really nice shades of gray. And I think this is what's going to work out best for our dye along to get the gray portion of our gradient. Now, when I do that, I'm actually going to try to use a little bit less yellow and get it to lean slightly more of a lavender gray, because looking at the picture of the blue jay, the gray parts they read a little bit lavender gray. And of course, we can't forget our yarn mops. This is the first one, our little itsy bitsy mini micro skein that was just made from the leftover of the skein that I used to wind these. And that is such a cool colorway. I love the pops of red on it and the dark purple that's, you know, almost leaning into black, and we've got some lighter purple and we've got some gray on here and some blue breaking, and that is just so fun. And I'm going to have to try to recreate this on a full skein. We also have our second yarn mop that had to get pulled into duty because this one got saturated with color so fast. And this was one that had been used in a previous video, of course. So it still has a lot of life left in it to be a yarn mop, but it's starting to come up pretty cool looking too. Lots of little specks of purple and everything. Pink and green and yellow. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching me play with trying to dye yarn gray with food coloring. And maybe this will give you some tips to try yourself if you want to try doing gray with food coloring. I'm not going to lie to you. Rebecca from ChemKnits was, of course, correct. This is super hard. And I definitely did not master it. I do think if I keep working at it, I could consistently start coming up with a nice range of grays using just food coloring. But, you know, for a first try, I think we did pretty good. And I hope you enjoyed watching and seeing how this all worked out. I also hope that you stick around for the next video where we actually dye our yarn for the ChemKnits May 2021 dye along. If you enjoyed watching this gray yarn dyeing experiment, be sure to hit the like button and make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss anything we try here. You never know what's going to happen. Anyway, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I will see you on our next adventure. Bye!
Would you say you had a great time?